The year is 1945. World War II has just ended, but in French Indochina, a new struggle is about to begin. For decades, Vietnam had been under French colonial rule. With the end of the war, a powerful wave of nationalism swept across the land. The Vietnamese people, led by a charismatic figure named Ho Chi Minh and his Viet Minh independence movement, yearned for a future free from foreign domination. They declared independence, but France was not ready to let go of its prized colony. This clash of wills would ignite a fire that would engulf Southeast Asia for the next 30 years. The conflict that followed is known as the First Indochina War. For nearly a decade, the Viet Minh waged a fierce guerrilla war against the French forces. They knew the terrain, the dense jungles, the sprawling rice paddies, and they had the support of the people. The French, despite their superior firepower, found themselves in a quagmire. The war reached its dramatic climax in 1954 at Dien Bien Phu. In a remote valley, the Viet Minh accomplished the unthinkable. They surrounded and laid siege to a heavily fortified French garrison. After a brutal 56-day battle, the French were forced to surrender. It was a stunning defeat that sent shockwaves around the world. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu effectively ended French colonial rule in Indochina. In the aftermath, the world powers gathered in Switzerland for the Geneva Accords. They decided to temporarily divide Vietnam at the 17th parallel. The north would be controlled by Ho Chi Minh's communists CAST, and the south would be a non-communist state, led by Ngo Dinh Diem. The plan was to hold elections in 2 years to reunify the country, but those elections never happened. The division became permanent, setting the stage for an even larger, more devastating conflict. As France withdrew, another global superpower stepped in, the United States. Driven by the Cold War fear of communism spreading, the so-called domino theory, Washington began to prop up the anti-communist government in South Vietnam. Initially, American involvement was limited to sending money, equipment, and military advisors, but the situation in the South was unstable. The Diem regime was corrupt and unpopular, and a powerful communist insurgency, the Viet Cong, was gaining ground. The United States found itself being drawn deeper and deeper into the conflict. The point of no return came in August 1964 with the Gulf of Tonkin incident. The U.S. claimed that its naval destroyer, the USS Maddox, had been attacked by North Vietnamese patrol boats in international waters. Though the details of the incident remain controversial to this day, it gave President Lyndon B. Johnson the justification he needed. The U.S. Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, granting Johnson broad powers to escalate military action. The war had officially become America's war. In early 1965, Operation Rolling Thunder began. This was a massive, sustained bombing campaign against North Vietnam. It was soon followed by the deployment of the first U.S. combat troops. The number of American soldiers in Vietnam would swell from just a few thousand to over 500,000 in a few short years. The Jungle War had begun in earnest. For years, the American public was told the war was going well, that there was light at the end of the tunnel. That illusion was shattered in January 1968. During the Vietnamese New Year holiday, known as Tet, the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong launched a massive coordinated surprise attack across South Vietnam. They struck over 100 cities and towns, including the capital, Saigon, where they even breached the walls of the U.S. Embassy. Militarily, the Tet offensive was a disaster for the communists. They suffered enormous casualties and failed to hold any of the territory they captured. But politically and psychologically, it was a major victory. Back in the United States, Americans watched the shocking images on their television screens. The fighting was far from over. In fact, it was more intense than ever. Trust in the government plummeted. The credibility gap widened into a chasm. Just a few months after Tet, the world would learn of another horror. In March 1968, a company of American soldiers entered the small village of My Lai. In a frenzy of violence, they massacred hundreds of unarmed civilians, mostly women, children, and elderly men. The news was suppressed for over a year, but when the story finally broke, it horrified the world. The My Lai massacre became a symbol of the war's brutality and the moral toll it was taking on the soldiers who fought it. As the war dragged on, opposition grew louder back home. The anti-war movement, which had started on college campuses, swelled into a massive, nationwide protest. Hundreds of thousands of Americans from all walks of life marched in the streets, demanding an end to the war. The country was deeply divided. The iconic chant, "Hey, hey LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?" echoed through the nation. The social and political turmoil was immense. In the face of this mounting pressure, President Johnson announced he would not seek re-election. His successor, Richard Nixon, promised peace with honor. He began a policy called Vietnamization, gradually withdrawing U.S. troops while training and equipping the South Vietnamese army to fight on its own. At the same time, Nixon expanded the war, secretly bombing Cambodia and Laos to disrupt enemy supply lines. Meanwhile, long and arduous peace talks began in Paris. For years, the negotiators wrangled over terms, with both sides unwilling to concede. Finally, in January 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were signed. The agreement called for a ceasefire, the complete withdrawal of U.S. troops, and the release of all prisoners of war. For America, the war was over. But for the Vietnamese, the fighting was not. The Paris Peace Accords left the political future of South Vietnam unresolved. The North and South Vietnamese armies continued to clash. Without the support of American air power and funding, the South Vietnamese military quickly began to crumble. In the spring of 1975, the North Vietnamese launched their final, decisive offensive. The South Vietnamese army collapsed with stunning speed. On April 30, 1975, North Vietnamese tanks crashed through the gates of the presidential palace in Saigon. The city fell. The world watched the frantic, chaotic final hours as helicopters evacuated the last Americans and desperate South Vietnamese from the roof of the U.S. Embassy. The war was finally over. Vietnam was unified under communist rule. The legacy of the Vietnam War is profound and far-reaching. The human cost was staggering. Millions of Vietnamese, both soldiers and civilians, were killed. Over 58,000 Americans lost their lives. The war left deep scars on the American psyche, changing how citizens viewed their government, their military, and their country's role in the world. It led to the end of the military draft and the passage of the War Powers Act to limit the president's ability to wage war without congressional approval. For Vietnam, the war's legacy is visible everywhere. The land is still scarred by bomb craters and contaminated with unexploded ordnance and toxic defoliants like Agent Orange, which continues to cause birth defects and health problems today. The conflict remains a complex and painful chapter in history, a powerful reminder of the devastating consequences of war, the complexities of international politics, and the enduring human desire for independence. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more historical content. See you in the next one.